Our mind is set up to easily for self-deception. It's a form of defense to stay in our illusion, because I'd rather hold on to my illusion about things rather than open up to realization that may be kind of threatening. In other words, I stay away from awakening of sorts.
Right. Basically, what I'm getting to from a very practical standpoint is that voice going on in your head, it's not you, first of all. It is not your identity, though. It will trick you into you believing that is who you are, is the voice itself. Hey, welcome back. Now, this one cuts close to the bone. Let's talk about stress, the kind that reshapes you, the kind that feels like failure, fatigue, confusion, but is actually trying to make you into something stronger. Most of us were never taught to see stress this way. We were taught to escape it. But in this conversation, Olaf and I unpack stress not as the enemy, but as a rite of passage, a signal from your soul that you're growing, evolving, and becoming capable of holding the life you asked for. I'm grateful you're here for this one. Let's dive in. I had an intro dreamed up, but I completely forgot what it is. It was all dramatic and everything. And
can you reconjure it?
Well, I was going to say something like, well, Dr. Olaf, here we are.
Yes.
Yeah. And, there is something I would say personally this lifetime that I've been going through is among the things that I've been going through in this lifetime is what I would call a spiritual awakening. It has gone on over the process of not just a short time, not just while I was in AA or doing the steps,
right? Not
just while I was studying spirituality, but it's been a major story arc throughout this life.
Mm-hmm.
We've done some degree of talking about lifetimes and reincarnation and things like that. And I, from my model of existence, this is a lifetime after many, many, many lifetimes. And this is where I sort of pull it all together and sort of go to the work on getting myself to the next level. And part of that for me has been this in recent times is the podcast, where you realize that this isn't just something for Sunday.
Yeah.
So to speak. This is something that you have to have a focus on and recognize the spiritual side of life as the sort of prime, I'm going to mess up the word, the materium, the prime focus and the motivating factor. It is the part that starts the mechanism working. It is the consciousness that brings, here's the idea, is there's an idea between materialism and panpsychism.
Okay.
Explain. So where in this context, panpsychism is the idea, and we need a new term for this. But panpsychism is the idea whereby consciousness is the originating factor for existence. Where on the other hand, material is the originating factor for existence. So in materialism, you have the Big Bang that sort of happened, God knows how, and eventually you have consciousness that arises from the matter. The matter becomes organized enough to sort of have consciousness and get organized to this level that we're at. And then panpsychism is quite the reverse, that consciousness is the originating factor.
Yeah. One of the tendencies of the Western mind, and Mark Matusik talks about it in his extraordinary paperback, Emerson, the Stoics and Me.
Okay.
Ralph Waldo Emerson, he unpacks the spirituality of transcendentalism via, Emerson. And in his introduction, Mark says, the Western mind gets it into binary thinking. It's got to be either or. You either win or you lose. It's either consciousness, whatever that is, or materialism. I know you're not saying that, but it can intimate that this is an issue. Which is it? And what he says, of course, in Eastern thinking, it's both and. It's dialectic. You can win, lose. You can lose, win. It can be consciousness that's materialized. It's material that becomes consciousness-sized, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And we do well to get away from either or binary thinking. The theologian Matthew Fox also writes about this in his writings. Get away from this either-oring of life. Either I love you or I don't. Well, hey, maybe it's a blend. I love you in certain ways, and I'm captivated in certain ways, and then other ways I'm fearful, and I'm being pushed back, and it's a both and. And part of the maturity of the human adult mind is to recognize things are not simplistic, dark and black and white, that we have nuanced colors and blends of things. So my understanding is that consciousness is potential energy that needs to be physicalized, if you will. But the physical is consciousness materialized.
So, with this whole podcast thing, there's many, many aspects of this. It looks a lot simpler than it is, to be quite honest, as you're finding out.
Yeah, maybe
too.
my language sounds too complicated and too out there. So.
Oh, no. I can definitely follow along. I did mention this to you just like a day or so ago, that I had started putting together some notes about how different, not so much canonical religions, but mystical religions like Christian mysticism and Kabbalism and Taoism and Sufism and Hermeticism. All have their ways of looking at stress, not how we in this culture look at stress, but is a catalyst, is a rite of initiation during the process of spiritual awakening and spiritual growth and enlightenment in one's lifetime.
Yeah. Stress can be an awakening inducer. When I worked with hospital staff running a spiritual care department, as I mentioned before, I put together a quick 45-minute workshop when they had a lunch hour for staff to come and look at stress. And there can be good stress, there can be bad stress. Bad stress is the kind that breaks you down, and it's usually a function of an ego hook. Good stress is the kind of energizer that focuses and purposes you to complete something important. And Hans Selye in his original research called it Eustress, the capital U. But the idea is, and then other researchers have found, Csikszentmihalyi talks about flow, that we are best when we are in flow. And that means not too much, not too little. But, because too little means we can become passive and apathetic. Too much, we can feel overwhelmed. So the idea is we are optimal when our sense of competence and our personal agency in terms of ability to do the job, to relate well, to complete the purpose, when we feel like I can do this and I am doing this, that's flow. You are stressed. Like when I'm ready to teach a seminar group in an evening, I'm stressed, but it's a positive stress. I'm getting mobilized. I'm getting my mind clear. So stress can be preparatory, mobilizing, energizing, flow inducing. But bad stress is a function of either over egoizing. Oh, it's up to me, and I got to do this, and all kinds of other pressures that you let hound you or pound you. You know.
Well, when we say good stress and bad stress, and I tend to agree with what you're talking about, but when we say that things like there's good stress and there's bad stress, I mean, I tend to go towards this like, well, when you're working out, there's good weight and there's bad weight. Good weight is the
Yeah.
weight that helps you build muscle, and bad weight is the weight that falls on top of you and breaks your
Yeah,
bones.
but
But
lightweight hardly works the muscle, so you become like, whoa, what's this?
there is stress that it has broken me in my life, and again, stress is stress is already what I do with the my environmental factors. My environment, stress is created when my environment is presenting me with challenges that I have not yet built myself into the human who is capable of handling those challenges.
Yeah.
Without without creating that stress within myself. And so the stress becomes a sort of maybe not even the catalyst, but it's the indication that my body is my mind, my beingness is making the changes necessary to become the human that can handle those things that are in front of me.
Stress is kind of a mobilizing dynamic, and one of the things that Hans Selye and stress experts say, stress is not so much a function of the stressor, the nature of it itself. Of course, a gun in your face, I mean, come on, that's of course an inherent stressor, but most things. So the key word that comes into play regarding our stress management is, how do we interpret the mobilizing factor? How do we frame it? Do we frame it as a serious problem or as also an opportunity?
Yes.
As a loss on the one hand, but also a gain.
Yes.
So how we interpret, how we frame it. And that, of course, comes from the deeper personal reservoir of the capacities of one's soul, and in spirit and mind and body.
Yeah, well, and I think something I'm definitely trying to get to or get across or at least convey is that we tend to think that if we're stressed out by situations that we're constitutionally incapable, or we're not the type of person that can handle those sort of things. Like I know I specifically, there is a great deal of things in my life that I've wanted, and those things that I've wanted at a certain there's a certain desire that I've had over time. These are good things, good positive things, but there are aspirations that I have with regard to my construction business and my insurance business and my not only podcasting, but being a catalyst for positive change consciously. And there has been this over the course of my life of many decades of this feeling where I had to choose. I had to choose between this or that, because you have to focus on one thing in order to really have the full impact that you want to have on something. You can't have this split focus, because then you won't do anything very well. Right. And I can tell you quite clearly that this has created such a paralytic stress in my life over many decades. But now at this point in my life, and I know I'm being kind of vague, but as explicit as I can without losing people to over details, is that over time it is that very stress that not was an indication that you couldn't handle life, that the life that you wanted, and you should just go give up and you should just go get a job at McDonald's or go, you know what I mean, whatever your parents or your friends or your advisors are telling you to do. But that this was a process of building up to become the human that you needed to become in order to handle all of these things. This stress is what I'm getting to the bottom of. And this is the motivating factor that led to, the stuff that I have on the screen that I started putting together from these more esoteric, more mystical.
It's a good
religions.
outline. Yeah, before our session today, we looked at it didn't discuss it much. I kind of glanced at it and,
Yeah. Well,
to understand it, and it's good. I want to backtrack for a moment, and you use the word awakening, spiritual awakening. Life is a series of awakenings. There's the literal awakening when you're whacked on the butt. You've either been pulled out or or kicked out of of a womb existence. You were a fish creature. And when I think about awakening, is a form of consciousness that opens up to understanding, and that understanding is about a dimension of life. Life is a complex, multidimensional entity, and we awaken to aspects of it piece by piece, maybe year by year or epoch by epoch. Life is a series of awakenings, and it's beautiful.
Absolutely. Not only physiologically, of course, but energetically, that is our access to this to creation itself, is the sexual energy.
Yes, and to the essence of our Creator.
Well, and the point being, yes, exactly. And the point being, our obsession with it and our perversions with it are simply indications of where we are evolutionarily and consciously. We're adolescent. If even that, with regard to our understanding of this sexual creative energy. And
yeah, and the word adolescence reminds me of that term being used in epochal research. A group of scholars, now Michiganders, don't freak out, from maybe it was Purdue in Indiana, not Ohio State, one or the other, but the way they characterize where the world is, and this was around the year 2000, very much adolescent, reactive, over emotional. It's all about me. It reminds me in the psychological developmental phase of counterdependence. As children get past the latency stage and before becoming full-blown adolescent, there is this between stage of counterdependency. And so adolescence has this element of counterdependency, and effort if you don't understand it or can't work with it, that kind of stuff. But this epochal group of scholars believed that we were on the cusp around 2000 of moving to the next world stage of more early adulthood, away from reactive adolescence to early adulthood, which was to be featured by more interdependence and cooperative modalities. As we grow into our 20s, we realize, hey, to get along in this world, it can't be about just me. Otherwise, you come off as a jerk, or worse. It's about we, but it's also me too. But it's also about you too. We learn about cooperation and interdependence and how to solve conflict and so on. And when I look at our world 25 years after 2000, are we past the adolescent stage? And sexuality is just one element of our, I think we're stuck. There are all kinds of precursors to the explosion of war. And part of mature reflection is to go to the precursors and understand those and own those. But on the other hand, it does not justify the aggression. It may lead to an understanding of the impetuses or impeti leading to the aggression, but it does not make the warring good or right. It might make it understandable in a theoretical or intellectual sense. Well, here are the precursors. Who wouldn't do war with those precursors, kind of thing? But I know sometimes I get very simplistic in my reactions, and I do say war is the most stupid thing that humans do, because it is an exact attack on the essence of spirituality, is to affirm life, to do life well, to build life-enhancing structures and processes, to make life work well. And war is an absolute destruction of life forms, whether structures or processes. That's what I'm getting.
I don't disagree, and that is more of an enlightened perspective. But at the same time, it's like the last thing you want. Say, for instance, as animal, it's about value systems, and when you think like you think at and I want to say lower levels of realization. And I don't mean to be highfalutin by saying it that way, but it's just what comes to mind. Is like when you think more animalistic, you could tell the lions, well, you're both going to get hurt if you go to battle together, but that doesn't matter. That's part of that's how it works from
part of the creature world.
Sometimes you got to hit the bully in the nose.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's just going to keep picking on you.
Yep.
They're going to keep pressing until you do something at a certain level. We could argue about what the right way to go about things and how to stop things, but I think that's just going to be a natural reaction based on our level of conscious awareness at this point in our existence.
Yeah, well, conscious awareness is sort of the mother lode of living well. I think so many people stay sleepwalking throughout life. They're not awake to very much. Going back to spiritual awarenesses, and maybe segue into do you want to talk about that?
I mean, over time, that's one of the what do you call it, refinements that I want to become as sort of practical. Like, it's great that we talk about things philosophically, but we also want to be practical. Like, here's what you can do. We study this. We know this is an issue, stress in a spiritual awakening. So I want to definitely bring in practical advice, but please keep going.
No, as we talked about just before we podcasted, the term that I use is practicable spirituality. Practicable is a legitimate word, and that means you can practice this. You can do this. We're not talking about ethereal, esoteric stuff that you just have to sort of...
That you study it and you put it back on the shelf and you go, that's
exactly,
nice.
Exactly. Exactly. We're talking about levels of awareness that empower us to get away from the tyranny of the ego into the flow of the deeper self that each of us are, but not just in the flow of the I am, but in the flow of I am more open to also you and we. That's the irony. And I have a thought, but I don't want to throw it in right now, an element that's very central to practicable spirituality.
Okay.
But your summary there, that's...
Well, so the thing was that I started just recognizing in my life is that the stress was not an indicator that there's something wrong with me or that I'm inadequate or I'm constitutionally incapable. But I came to the point in my life where these same inputs would come in, these same thoughts or these same environmental factors, or I'd come up against the same challenges. And I came to realize, because the potholes of life within my consciousness, it's not so much that you can't handle the things out here because you're physically or mentally incapable. It's that energetically sort of the flow becomes disrupted because something is in the way energetically within your consciousness to say you can't do that because this is unsolved or unresolved or this is in the way. It's not that that's the actual matter of fact. It's just that something is energetically in the way, even though you're like, no, I just yesterday I felt like I could make this happen for myself, and all of a sudden today everything's falling apart. Why is that? There's nothing changed in a tangible sense. You're better, you're more adequate, you're more capable than what you're actually showing, and it's not that you're not doing the work. You definitely are. You're definitely putting energy towards getting these things resolved within your consciousness, and sometimes it takes decades. Sometimes it takes, dare I say, lifetimes in order to smooth over these potholes.
One of the thoughts that came to mind as you were saying what you did is when I think about a constructive energy stream in my life and suddenly it's blocked. It's blocked by a counter energy from me. Now it may seem like it's from out there, but it's really from me. So I will fess up to, my undergrad performance was very unimpressive. Okay, my overall grade point is just a little bit better than a C. But then since then, a couple of masters and a doctorate, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not about that. It's about there were some energies that hindered my being more optimal as a student in college, and it's painful. It was emotionally painful, and one of the blockages, counter energies. I would typically begin a course with excitement. I'm excited about learning. Wow, a history course of ancient China or whatever it would be. I get excited. I get the books. I start in. And then, there's a test coming. And then, I become kind of uninterested. And, I wasn't very disciplined. I didn't stick with it. And, and then I would maybe get a D in the test or even flunk. Or if I got lucky and booked it, get a C, But there was a counter energy blocking the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And little did I know for a long time the lack of confidence in me, myself. And I didn't own the fact that I didn't think I had it. So it became kind of a subconscious block to my performance. But then there were courses that I would be very excited about, like a psychology course or whatever. And I would break through that block just out of sheer interest. And I would do really, really well. My college total record has a bunch of F's and D's and B's and A's and some C's. It's either I really did well or chuck it, So at times the energy wasn't enough of a block, the inadequacy energy, I can call it. The energy. Now, it goes even deeper. Another dynamic in college was whether I liked the professor or not. If I liked the professor, for some reason, I would get over the hump and do okay. But if for some reason I just didn't groove with the professor or like the professor, but I would take it on myself and fail. It's kind of like, I don't like your professor, therefore I'm failing. That makes a hell of a lot of sense. What was that about? And I learned through therapy with a psychoanalyst who happened to be visiting the campus and teaching a course. So I did some therapy with him. And I remember the breakthrough moment when he said, Olaf, what comes to mind when I say alma mater? Ding, 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 ding. You talk about awakening. Awakening to my own perverse, psyche, if you will. Not perverse, I'm just kidding. But awakening to a shadow aspect of my psyche that I was projecting my anger, pained relationship to my mother. She was violent toward my dad. She was schizophrenic. And I incorporated that inside of me, and I projected that subconsciously onto professors. In a psychic sense, a professor that I didn't like was the mommy me that I was so angry at and pained about. That awakening put me on a road of awareness that set me up for academic success.
Well,
so there's awakenings, all right. You're right.
Yeah, certainly. And what I definitely want to drive at is that these things that we come across, like, how do you say it, your inadequacies or your less than optimal performance at a undergraduate level, I think we tend to look at those things as being that there's something wrong with you, or you're inadequate, or you're just not good enough, and we sort of villainize ourselves and each other for just not being good enough. But the reality is that when we come up against these challenges where we are, for lack of a better term, inadequate, this is a time to celebrate, because this is, and we can go into this because they say the same sort of thing over and over again. This is when the light of the Creator is trying to fill you up, but the vessel is just not big enough yet. It's not able to contain the light that it is trying to give you. And so it shows you. It shows you what in Kabbalistic terms, for instance, is called your tikkun. It's the work of bringing back the shattered pieces of your soul, the shattered pieces of existence back together and sort of reassembling things.
In some sense, it was, you have up there the divine purpose in shattering. The breaking was part of the plan. What needed to be shattered was the blockage, the energy blockage. And then the healing was bringing the pieces back together. And later on, I came to terms with the deep pain regarding my mother, the anger pain. And that was a big step toward full recovery, in my alcoholic way of being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess what I would say to anybody listening in the audience is part of the reason for giving yourself time to meditate, to be deeply with yourself and your experience, and to begin with rhythmic breathing. All of the spiritual masters in one way or another talk about the rhythmic breathing because it puts you into a state of receptivity to be able to look at things that might be threatening. But when you put yourself into a state of trust, one classical form, as meditators know, is you go into the 4-4-4. You count slowly to 4 as you breathe in. You hold the breath to the count of 4. You release it slowly to the count of 4. You hold. And then you go into a cycle. And you sort of let yourself be in a mode of receptivity. And then in that mode, one of the techniques is, if you wish, you can focus on some issue where you may feel overcome by some form of stress, But when you are in this modality, you are in a transcendent state to yourself where you can look at your stress without feeling threatened by it, because the stress is not you. You are you, and you have the stress. And you're kind of making space to look at it differently.
Absolutely. And that meditative, that those counts, generally what is, I do like a 4, 7, 8 count.
Sure.
So breathing, and maybe breathing in for 4 and counting 7 to hold it.
But folks don't hold it to 100. You may not be
You
awake.
may not survive that whole thing, but that'll help me fall asleep. That'll help me, and it awakens your parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, the vagus nerve. Yeah.
Yep, and it helps you to sort of rest and digest and regenerate, as opposed to being in sort of this fight or flight sympathetic nervous system that we spend the vast majority of our time in nowadays, which is destroying our health, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so. And again, and maybe I should stop saying this. Boy, my waveform looks big. I hope this turns out okay. Oh, so part of something I wrote here, and I feel inspired to share it. And we'll see if it fits in there. And like I say, we're trying to, over time we'll get better at this, but we got to try things. I wrote this while I was studying the Kabbalistic things, and something for me is that when I get stressed a lot of times, or I come up against a hard time, you come up with coping mechanisms. And some of them are not so healthy, and they could be substance abuse or some sort of addiction. They could be spending too much money, or doom scrolling, or sex, or whatever it might be. We all have our own vices that we come up against. And so, based on a Kabbalistic approach, I wrote this as when you come up against these things, this is the light of creation, or the light of a creator. This is a Kabbalistic approach or thought process. Is the light of creator. This is a time to rejoice. Is when we're faced with these difficulties where we want to regress into our these more basic sort of behaviors that are not going to get us anywhere. So is that first you stop. Just stop what you're doing. Stop the thought process. The thought process that's rolling over and over in your head is definitely not helping you.
Exactly.
And from some perspectives, is your mind is set up purposefully for to lie to you. There's a very famous neurologist who talks about that, and you talk about stinking thinking in AA and addictive And I would say personally that, Satan itself is very clearly the mind, is the conscious mind and the ego. And it is the most beloved, necessary thing. And I don't want to get off track too much. I know you might want to comment on that, but
no, I don't want to get into Satan, good and evil. I just want to say a term that I think psychologically is a little bit better is the deceiver.
That's good.
And I've studied the psychology of self-deception. Our mind is set up to easily for self-deception. It's a form of defense to stay in our illusion, because I'd rather hold on to my illusion about things rather than open up to realization that may be kind of threatening. In other words, I stay away from awakening of sorts.
Basically, what I'm getting to from a very practical standpoint is that voice going on in your head, it's not you, first of all. It is not your identity, though. It will trick you into you believing that is who you are. Is the voice itself. And it's not. That's not true. That's not who you are. And then once you separate your eternal identity from this voice, it will still do its best for, in my case, for many decades to trick you into believing that this is what is guiding you along the way, and it's not, and it doesn't have to be there, and you can exist without that voice. The voice is a tool. It doesn't have to run your life.
Yeah, I'd like to nuance this a bit. Any voice, a specific voice that comes from within you or comes to mental realization, but we'd have to get specific maybe to unpack that a bit. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. I mean, you're right. If do not over-identify and think that voice is you. It's not. But the voices, at the same time, inside of us have, I guess, something to say.
They do. And that, folks, is why Dr. Olaf is here. Not that I always agree with him. However, he does bring credibility to the show, as opposed to me just standing here
you do some great work, man. This is
random stuff.
We bring different gifts, different skill sets, but I love our diversity and our blend. I really do. So
yeah, as do I. So I want to give a practical tool, and hopefully this helps you or someone you love. There's a basic idea, and we'll get into it over time, and I can see that this is going to turn into a multi-part episode, which is good because it takes a lot to write these things, and we'll get into it over time. But is that from a very basic sense is that there are two things that you want from a Kabbalistic perspective. Is there is the source energy, and we'll get into more specific terms and things like that, but there is the source energy, and the source just by itself needs someone to share with, so it creates the vessel, and now the vessel receiving the light of source, which it didn't earn, the vessel wants to receive the light. That's what leads to its fulfillment, but it also wants to share the light. It wants to be like the source itself. What happens now, from a more practical sense, is that we tend to steal this light in the form of in the form of things that bring us dopamine, in the form of addictions, and what we talked about, the doom scrolling and the whatever else. We don't earn the light by allowing the void to exist within ourselves, and we earn the light that way. And I know I'm not making any sense, but hopefully I will later. But anyways, when you're faced with times where you want to fall into a addictive tendency, from a Kabbalistic approach, you say, aha, the light of fulfillment of Yahweh is what you desire. This is the light of fulfillment that you're looking for, not the substance or not the addiction itself. You're looking for that sense of fulfillment from the deepest, most core, essential level. And the steps would be, and we'll give this context over time, is that step one is you pause. You pause, and you stop the incessant ramblings of the mind.
it's quite a mindful to swallow. Um, one thinking response I have is the workings of existence are designed for us to fulfill our humanity as intended by our Creator, but it's in the framework of struggle. It is a journey, but it is a journey that's fraught with dangers and some pains and some, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death kind of stuff. You're talking about the deeper struggles that are inherent in human existence, traps and possibilities. And what is really crucial is our openness to this journey and the struggle, to become really awake to our own human experience and living consciously, living meditatively in the best sense of being aware of how I am and who I am day by day becomes very important. Different systems talk about it differently, and one system will speak more to a person than another. But we're trying. I always try to get at, okay, what do the systems really try to do? What are they trying to say? But what do they do for people?
Well, I don't know if I went about this the right way, because I'm realizing there's contextual things to even be able to understand what I wrote here. But I'm just going to continue with it, and then we'll get better at it over time. So, yeah. Step 2, say, Satan, I see you there. What a pleasure. You offer me a sample platter of temporary gratification, that is whatever it is that you're desiring, a way around my pain while I pay for it later, and toil and complain and beg in the darkness for that much longer. Thank you, but no thank you. I now wish to earn the real thing. And even without the context, I think that, can get across. Step 3, look towards the eternal light of God, which is forever shining upon you. Step 4, say, God, fill this vessel with your light and make it whole. Show me the lesson that I need to learn here. Please, Lord, I demand it. I have too long now gone in circles in the dark. Give me the strength to carry through. I am ready to move on. Show me how to change this vessel to receive the light that I desire, the light that you are shining upon me, but I can't desire it, and that's what's creating the stress. Step 5, accept the pain and discomfort. Don't try to make it go away so fast with the temporary gratification. It seeks the pain and discomfort seek only to cleanse your soul. Cleanse your soul. Make the necessary suggested changes that you get an intuitive sense of what you need to change about yourself. Whether you want to go ahead and do it right now, you definitely get a sense of what needs to change.
Okay.
And receive the light that is being offered to you. Step 6, be eternally grateful. And grateful doesn't mean just giving God lip service and saying, "Oh, thank you, God, thank you." It means truly feeling it at an emotional level, and gratefulness really means actualizing and carrying out the steps that you need to, carrying out and living the learnings that you now carry, as opposed to just saying thank you and going about things the way that you used to.
Yeah. A provocative, and I can relate positively to those steps, very much so. The provocative word is a very opening word, Satan or Satan. And from a scriptural standpoint, as I understand it, and it can be interpreted in different ways, Satan has an odd double function. On the one hand, in the early phase of Scripture, which goes to the Israelites, Satan was the scapegoat. The scapegoat was actually part of a ritual where the community, a tight-knit tribal community, where a lot of good and bad things can happen over a certain period of time. And so a lot of tensions. But then another side of Satan comes into play, and this is played in the book of Job, where the Satan is in conversation with the Creator, with Yahweh. And Satan negotiates how to challenge Job, because Job has it so good. So Satan says to the Creator, of course he's your example of a faithful man. How things are so good. He's got the most perfect wife. He's got the greatest children. He's got the greatest crops. He's got the most wonderful award-winning animals. You know, let me test him. And then let's see where this great Job is really at. Yeah, but the point is, Satan becomes like an attorney for the prosecution to push you and see if you really are criminal or not, in some sense. Let me test Job and see if he has a deeper faith, a deeper spirituality that transcends all the goody-goodies in his life. When all the goody-goodies are gone, the crops failed, the animals died, his wife died, he's full of, sicknesses and boils and whatever. Now, Job, do you still believe? Do you still turn to the light? So the satanic has a peculiar role of being in some sense against us in order that in the long run it is for us. But it is, I'm not like glorifying Satan, saying, hey, it's just a test, it's okay, just kind of go with it. And Jesus himself went through a testing. The attorney for the prosecution tried to hook Jesus into one of three, no-nos, if you will, spiritually, from the standpoint of biblical spirituality. One is over-materializing your life. Hey, you have been on a spiritual quest, including fasting. Aren't you suffering from the fasting? Come on. Get some bread. Materialize. Get out of the suffering, with an easy materialistic option here. And of course, Yeshua, how I prefer to call him, because there are all kinds of Jesuses out there. The biblical Yeshua says the human being doesn't live by bread alone, but by the truth from the sacred, the truth of the sacred, which again, underlies these steps, the truth of the sacred. His second temptation, hey, since you're so special in the eyes of God, why don't you just jump off the precipice? The angels would catch you at the bottom. Huh? Well, I have read literature that says, what was the temptation there? What was the attorney for the prosecution trying to hook Jesus on? This childlike dependency on God. Hey, just have a childlike dependency on God. God will catch you. God will help you. And what does Yeshua say? Do not test. Do not test the Creator. In other words, embracing human responsibility. Don't test by just abdicating your human responsibility. At least that's one way to interpret it. And the biggie, status, power, and wealth. Status, power, and wealth. Okay, Yeshua, I understand. You can easily counter me, but here's the biggie, right? Here's the biggie. Status, power, and wealth. All you have to do, Yeshua, is live according to my design of things, and I will give you all the power. You'll be more than Musk. You'll be more than Steve Jobs or whoever. You'll be so much more because you are aligning with my take on things. And the satanic take on things is in the circle of darkness. And Yeshua refused to jump into some circle of darkness. He stayed in his growing enlightenment. And out of that growing enlightenment, he started captivating in his mind his deep purpose. The deep purpose to fulfill the old covenant finally and to initiate the new covenant. Old way of understanding how humans are beneficially related to the Creator versus a new way that human beings are now related to the Creator. And it's an outstanding drama that ends the old, but at the same time initiates the new.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we have that new way. I think very simply, if you want to look at it from I like to mix the science and the religion and bring it all together. I think really what we're going through is simply learning to adapt the prefrontal cortex, the intellect, to the physicality. And that's what all the stories and all the mythologies and all the religions are about. Is the psychological, the psycho-spiritual mythologies that we come up with about these things in order to get through it. And Satan, from a Kabbalistic perspective, is definitely the opponent or adversary, but not the enemy that you're trying to combat.
Right,
it
right.
is, and in my perspective, it is your best friend. It is the one. Now, this is the same way. I know. We'll see where this goes, but
maybe a bit much.
Well, let me get it out though first.
Please.
Is that in the same way that the weight that you're trying to bench press is not your enemy, but it definitely is your opponent.
Okay.
It is your friend because it's what is there to make you stronger. Okay. Without it, you can't evolve. You can't get any stronger. Without it, you're just, everything's fun and fancy free. Without it, you can't develop and learn to master the energies. Is what we're becoming. We're becoming masters of energy. And we're becoming masters of this new tool called a prefrontal cortex that other animals on our planet don't have, but they just go along, with things on a different level.
Yeah, I like how you said that. The opponent, whatever form, that ultimately seeks to strengthen you, and in that sense, Satan is a friend, quote unquote.
Yeah, you can't go against God. God is the whole damn thing. You can't go against. This is structurally built into the system to strengthen you, and so that you become the one. You become more like God. You earn the light of the Creator. This is the idea. And so that's kind of sort of the way the Kabbalists put it, but that's more as my approach. I'm arguing out.
Yeah, and I can say, my Trinitarian understanding can incorporate this, but incorporates it within a canopy of understanding and meaning that is broader than that, but it incorporates that. But that's another whole conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely more to it.
Absolutely.
You can't say it all at once, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, just to finish up those.
Thank you for this work.
Well, I got to finish the steps, though.
Yeah.
I got to finish the rest of the steps. So, step 6 was to be eternally grateful and fulfilled, continuing to look only towards the light, seeking only for knowledge of His will for you. Here we go. There's the Trinitarian AA. And the power to carry that out.
That's, yep.
Step 11. His will is only to give you more light, and your will is only to receive and share it.
Yeah.
And I use the word his loosely, not to indicate a male God, and I'm not even sure that it's a masculine energy. But step 7, don't believe everything you read. Translate into a narrative that works for you. Mind blown. You're welcome. P.S. A gentle suggestion: do it before you have to start the cycle over and over again, in order to become that strengthened being.
Yeah. And that's a good closing word.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Or
absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, there's volumes, and like I said, we could cover a year's worth just these notes, which is fine. We can keep going with stress and.
Let me just again.
And you got a couple books there. What do you got?
Well, I just want to, just to highlight again the one that I mentioned before, by Mark Matousek, Matousek, a paperback. Emerson, the Stoics, and Me. And he gets into what transcendentalist spirituality means and how we can appropriate it in our lives. So maybe next time I'll touch on those 10 aspects of transcendentalism as another model of spirituality, because the Kabbalistic understanding is a model, and it's right on in terms of of a dimension of human spirituality that is there, you know. But Emerson and the transcendentalists, and transcendentalism is kind of a cousin of this in some ways. So Emerson, the Stoics, and me, and I hope to unpack that a little bit next time.
Yeah,
but
so
it's good.
Please tune in next time, and you can watch Dr. Olaf and I continue to battle out who can get their stuff in during the course of the show. And yeah,